Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you here on the eve of the NFL Draft. Oh my God, boys! Sports content, actual live sports content coming our way tomorrow. It's so special. I can't. It's this pretty little thing we can hold in our hands. Like, oh God, I can't wait.
I think the sports populace, especially the sports internet populace, is so famished for this kind of content that you're going to see more idiotic and outlandish draft takes than maybe we've ever seen, and that's saying something.
The hot take reserve is like overflowing. It's kind of like oil prices right now, where they're literally paying people to store it. I mean, the reserves have been topped off. Elo, I know you're excited for this. So, how are the Dolphins going to screw up and not draft Tua Tagovailoa?
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, the sports fan in me is excited for this draft. Thankfully, it's here. As a Dolphin fan, I'm petrified because I think the Dolphins will screw this up, and they'll probably going to screw it up by taking an offensive lineman, just like they did the year they took Jake Long over Matt Ryan, or they have a history of this. So I'm very petrified. I'll be excited until that clock ticks and says Miami Dolphins, and then if we pass on Tua.
If they pass on Tua and draft Herbert, what will you do?
Cry. And just
Why?
Resign to the fact that the Dolphins will never be relevant. Because I don't, that's just what's going to be. I mean,
I don't know. My hot takes on Tua are well known to everybody who follows me on Twitter. So.
Oh, that's right. You don't think he's very good because God forbid he throws a lot of accurate passes and touchdown passes. But hey,
behind five of the best offensive linemen in college football, where Justin Herbert doesn't. But
yeah, because that's the reason. That's the reason why he's very good. It's not by the way, guess what? Other Alabama quarterbacks have had the same offensive lineman. It doesn't mean they're in the NFL. So, by the way, the number one overall pick, Joe Burrow, he had a lot of offensive linemen.
So what makes Tua any? Anyway, we're getting off track here. Let's talk about the actual UCF
Tua to
stuff.
Miami, please. By the way, me and Murph actually watched him in person. We'll kind of cite Murph. Can you please straighten Jeff out? Tua is pretty good.
No, Tua is very good. The only issue with me and with Tua for me is the obvious one, which is, do you want to spend that kind of draft capital and sort of tie your franchise's future to a guy who's had 5 knee surgeries or 5 major surgeries in the last surgeries, but 5 major surgeries in the last handful of months?
It's worth thinking about. It's worth thinking about. Yeah, that's.
Ask Mackenzie Milton what he thinks. Who is he like?
But I will not be here to. I'm not here to let anybody besmirch Tua. He's a very good player who's got all the tools you want. Who's got all the tools you need to be a good quarterback. And if his mobility is up to snuff and he can still do that and be dangerous with his legs while keeping his arm strength and his ability to read things quickly and his accuracy, he's going to be very good. And they give him a good offensive line, then you're going to see what he did in college kind of repeated, because that's what he can do when he's got good personnel around him. He's a very talented player.
You're right. I mean, I agree. He'll be an excellent fit for the Los Angeles Chargers. Anyway, let's talk about. We're going to talk about the NFL draft from the UCF perspective. We've got a bunch of profiles up of potential players who will either get drafted or be signed by NFL clubs shortly following the NFL draft, which will take place, of course, Thursday through Saturday. and we'll be live, and will probably be a gigantic technical cluster. This is the world's most important Zoom call. Someone's going to screw it up.
Especially if Spectrum's involved. What?
And Jeffrey, as much as you want to dog the Dolphins, you know that Dave Gettleman is going to lose connection when the Giants come on the clock at 4.
Oh, yeah.
No. Here's the thing. I know Dave Gettleman will be fine. You know why? I guarantee you, underneath his desk, he's got like a backup landline phone that's like his grandmother's old handheld rotary, the one that AT&T gave you, back in the day when you signed up for phone service with Ma Bell. Guarantee you he's got one of those. Guarantee you he's got one of those lying around just in case. We will also talk about some basketball moves happening with, Collin Smith and Darin Green Jr. Declaring for the NBA draft, but maybe, but not really. And also a new addition to the UCF men's basketball program in former Louisville guard Darius Perry. You can follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter, Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret, and of course, blackandgoldbanneret.com. All right, so NFL draft. Here we go, boys. We've been waiting for it for a while. They've been saving it up for us, and here we are. Thursday night is your first round. Friday is your second and third, and then Saturday is 4 through 7. Essentially, there are 7 UCF players who are kind of in the major draft pool, and we're going to start with the guy who's at the top of the boards in terms of who everyone thinks, or who the most likely consensus is that will be the highest UCF player taken, and that's Gabe Davis, a wide receiver who came out early, projected to be a mid-round selection, not a first-rounder, but maybe second, but more likely third or fourth. Obviously came out early. He's 6'3", 213. Ran the 40 at 4.54. By the way, I have his profile up, and we're going to be using those. I found a very interesting comp, Brian Murphy, and that was Jordy Nelson, who was also listed at about 6'2", 6'3", also about 217, and had a 40 time in the 4.5s when he came out of K-State in 2008. And 613 catches and 72 touchdowns over a 10-year career. Not too bad. I think Gabe Davis would be pretty happy with that. But what are you hearing about Gabe Davis and some of the strengths and weaknesses of him and where he might fit in?
Well, and I don't want to come out I don't want the first thing that I'm going to say is to be bashing your article, because I let's be honest.
Go ahead. What am I here for?
I do like what you've written, Jeffrey. However, the Jordy Nelson comp to me doesn't make much sense in that Jordy, although he ran a so-so 40 time, was really a fantastic deep threat. He could really stretch the field. In his prime, he was really good at stretching the field. He was he's a high school track star. So I don't see Gabe having that type of speed. He doesn't have that type of speed. Let's be honest. He's more gonna get open because of his size, his sort of fluidness in his routes, and he's got some speed, but not like that long speed that Jordy Nelson had. I don't like comps, because comps are really they're kind of squishy. It depends on so many things, not just the player makeup, but also the scheme makeup is too. I just see Gabe being successful because of his body and the fact that he knows really he's got the innate traits that you already need. Maybe not the speed, but high pointing the ball, being really tough at the point of attack when the ball is in the air, shielding off defenders really well. We've seen him use double moves, and he's pretty good at not showing his moves to defenders. He's got a lot of the fundamentals down. There are some athletic traits to his game that are missing. Like I said, deep speed is not there, but he can make up for that because he's a big guy who knows how to play with his size. And and obviously with the fine tuning that comes with being in the NFL, he could be certainly a consistent contributor.
What teams do you think would probably be looking for a guy like him?
Didn't we mention we mentioned Green Bay on the for those of you who were watching the watch along with us when we did the the USF game. We talked about Gabe Davis, I think, on that. And we mentioned Green Bay, and I said that Green Bay wanted somebody with more speed, but certainly they are wide receiver starved. There are tons of good wide receivers in this draft. It's a good reason why Gabe, even though he's pretty good, is probably going to fall to the fourth round because this draft is absolutely chock full of good wideouts. But certainly, I think the Green Bay Packers would pop up just because they really need someone, and that'd be an awesome fit too. Because I think I remember that the Packers are Gabe's favorite team, and I think that would be pretty cool.
Eric Lopez, what do you think about where you think Gabe might end up, and where do you think he might go in terms of the round? You thinking higher or lower?
The issue is this is such an incredible wide receiver draft, like insane, right? Maybe the deepest of all time. That's been discussed. That it's hard to tell where he could go because I think the question is really depends on what happens in the first round. Like, when do the wide receivers start going? Do they go early first round, or do teams take the approach of there's so many great receivers that we're going to wait, and all of as a result, some of the receivers that we thought would go super early might get pushed back. So, and as a result, there's a rippling effect to that. And I think that could affect Gabe moving forward. So I think, to me, I feel like it's around 4 to 5 range because I just think there's so much talent at wideout. And this really is going to come down to what does the team prefer as far as a wideout. It's that good. Like, you have options. Like, there's the kid that I love a lot, Claypool from Notre Dame, who I think is like, people are saying second or third round. And I think in a normal year, he might be a first rounder. So I think Gabe, that to me, that's a round 4 to 5, and it could come down to, I think Green Bay, it makes sense, assuming they don't go receiver early. Some teams might go multiple. How about Minnesota? Could be a team. I mean, it's at that point, it's like who fits in. But if I had to kind of put a number on it, I would say round 4. Hopefully, if the receivers go early in the first round, I could see round 4 would be the number I would go. I think it's a round later than Traquan because it's a deeper draft. I think otherwise, I think he would probably be going where Traquan did in round 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see it. I see that certainly happening. You must have been looking at Our Lads because they had him as the number 19 receiver, and you kind of see Gabe somewhere around that like 17 to 20 mark when you rank the receivers. They have him going around rounds 4 or 5. You're right about the receivers that are coming out, though. I mean, obviously, the 2 guys from Alabama, Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs, CeeDee Lamb out of Oklahoma, Denzel Mims of Baylor, Justin Jefferson of LSU, your guy Claypool out of Notre Dame, T. Higgins from Clemson, who's been all over the place, Michael Pittman Jr. out of SC. Even when you start getting down to the area where Gabe is ranked, you got Van Jefferson, who's the son of Sean Jefferson, formerly of UCF, and currently an assistant coach with the New York Jets. And James Prochet, who we've seen enough of out of SMU, he's somewhere in that neighborhood. So, a pretty packed draft for wide receivers, but we should see Gabe go. Yeah, we probably would see him go in day 2, but I think more like we'll see him go early day 3. So, now the other guy who I think might get drafted, relatively high. I say relatively high because it's because again, everything right now everything is fairly relative. There's no surefire first rounders for UCF really this year, but Neville Clark, prototypical NFL cover corner, right, Murph? You think you've spent plenty of time with Neville over the years as he's come to UCF and really developed into a very good cornerback, the classic ball hawk guy. He's got the size at 6'1", 187. He didn't run the 40 at the combine when he went to the NFL combine, but he does have a tendency to gamble at times, but Lord knows we've heard that about a number of other guys. What's the report on Neville, and where would you think he would go?
Yeah, he's a guy who, for him, obviously it's going to be probably 7th round or undrafted. We hope he gets there in the 7th round on Saturday. It's all going to be about fit for him really specifically because he does press man and really man coverage really well. And because that's what UCF's defense, that's what they play primarily. It would be difficult for him, I think, to learn like a defense with a chief zone scheme. So hopefully he gets, to a team that relies more on man. And if you look, at like last year's stats, you got teams like the Chiefs and Patriots, Lions, who played a lot of man coverage. In that scheme, because he's really long at 6'1", really rangy. He jams guys really well at the line of scrimmage. And although he doesn't have great back pedal speed, he doesn't have really fluid hips. He doesn't have great deep speed to sort of make up ground once he does gamble and sort of miss if he tries to undercut routes. He is so long and so much of an athlete with his size that he can just sort of shadow guys. And if he keeps them in front of him, he can shut you down. The issue with Novell is, obviously he needs to just sort of play his game and not try to do too much. That's what we saw him do a lot with UCF was he would gamble too much and he would try to make the big play, and then all of a sudden it would be, he would miss it. It would be left open for a blown coverage and a big play for the opponent on the back end. When he just sort of stays steady and just sort of trusts his natural skill, he's a really good corner. But I think because he's in a really specific – he's like really scheme specific. He is mostly a man-on-man corner with good like short area coverage skills. You really don't want to get him matched up going one-on-one down the sideline with a burner because he's probably not going to win that race.
Eric, what do you think about the corner situation out there? Where do you see Neville kind of fitting in, or Novell, I should say?
Well, I think Brian makes. I mean, a lot of this could come down to the scheme, right? Like, what team thinks they could fit him in a scheme? And I wonder, both of you, and this is the interesting thing: does the uniqueness of this year's draft, where there was no UCF Pro Day, there was no in-person talks and things like that, does that have an effect on guys like Clark and others on the back end of the draft?
I think it might throw the back end of the draft into a little bit more chaos than usual. You might see some guys go way higher or way lower than you might think because there's it. I guess one of the good things about this, or at least maybe some more interesting thing about this, is it's going to provide us more insight into how certain franchises think, because there's no groupthink, or at least there's significantly less groupthink, I think, this year than there normally has been, and teams are kind of doing a lot of their own research. I think sometimes the guys in the front office, they think a lot about, what is it. I'm not saying that they're governed by it, but I do think that the press has a little bit of influence on things in terms of what they'll deny it, of course, but I find it hard to believe they don't, because some general managers really do care about that. But yeah, I think it'll make for something really interesting. Like, I would not be surprised to see Novell Clark get picked, maybe as high as the 5th round by some team that really, really likes him. Or maybe not get selected at all for that reason. You could say that about several other players for UCF, including some of the guys we'll talk about in a little bit. I don't know, Murph, what do you think?
No, I think that's right. I think, I think the impact really would fall more on players we're going to talk about here shortly, more so than Novell. I do feel confident that Novell, with his 6'1" size, because, man, big corners are obviously in vogue, that he's going to get drafted. I think no matter what, he's still going to get drafted. It certainly helped that he was at the Combine. So he got to talk to, a lot of team officials there. And, for what it's worth, earlier Wednesday, we spoke with Willie Martinez, the assistant coach and defensive backs coach for UCF. And I asked him about Novell, and he mentioned how, he's heard from both Novell and from some NFL personnel that Novell's done really well in interviews. And he's really had some good interviews when he has been, maybe on the board or face to face with NFL personnel. So that helps his cause. What really hurts are the players that we're going to talk about now. And I would say, just to sort of, like a segue here, I would say it hurts Adrian Killins more.
Okay. I'll tell you what. Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk about some of the guys who are kind of on that gradient between getting drafted and not getting drafted, including Adrian Killins and a few others. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you here. We're talking NFL Draft. We talked about two guys who we think are probably most likely to actually hear their names called this coming weekend, Neville Clark and Gabe Davis. Now we're going to talk about some guys who are kind of on the borderline of whether or not they're going to get drafted. We're going to start with a guy who I've mentioned in my profile of him on the site is one of the most important players in certainly recent UCF history, maybe of all time, Adrian Killins. 4 years at UCF, came in and contributed mightily as a true freshman. We know about the speed, we know about the size or lack thereof. It depends on where you look. He's either a very late round pick. Our Lads has him round 6 or 7. Had a really good Shrine Bowl, by the way. He sort of flashed his wares as a pass receiver. 92 yards on 7 catches, and kind of, and that's the kind of guy who I feel like he's going to have to be at the next level. I made my best case comparison was Tyreek Hill, and Murph, I know you're probably going to rip that here in a second, but but he, I can see that best case scenario playing out as he's as he turns into this real speedster that you kind of get the ball to on the outside, or you run jet sweeps with and all that kind of stuff in a sort of Andy Reid, Frank Reich style offense. But let's talk about whether or not you feel he's going to get drafted or not. Do you agree with that? Like, he might be a late rounder, or would Adrian rather field free agent phone calls?
That's a good though. That's a different topic. I mean, maybe he would like to have the opportunity to go where he, a place of his choosing, but there are certainly a better chance that he gets drafted now than, say, if he was coming out, 7 to 10 years ago, because guys like him are now populating the NFL ranks. And, this is obviously not just the Tavon Austin. I know people look at Tavon Austin as like, well, he was this massive first-round bust. Like, yeah, he was, but he's still playing. He's had a long NFL career.
Made himself a lot of money.
Yeah. Obviously, Tyreek Hill is a special case. I don't like the comp there only because Tyreek Hill is a real route runner with real wide receiver skill that we have not seen from AK, who mostly lines up in the slot and runs very simple patterns. And so for me with AK, I've said recently that he's sort of like a poor man's Tariq Cohen to me, a guy who can obviously be a total weapon on special teams, but if you get him in space as a receiver or as a toss runner, he can do dynamite things. He's not as quite laterally quick, I think, as Tariq Cohen, but he obviously has the straight line vertical speed. What I want to see from him more at the next level is he's got to continue to improve as a receiver. We saw that a little bit in this last season or the last couple seasons. Actually, not that much. He only had 8 catches last year. Wow. But he's got to do more of that. Right. I mean, that makes no sense. He had 25 in 2017 and 18 and 20 and 19 in 2018, and he's got to do more of that because that's where he's going to make the most of his impact on offense in the NFL. We UCF fans got really tired of watching him run the middle in Josh Heupel's scheme. Well, I guarantee you he's not going to be used like that in the NFL. He just will not be at 5'8", about 165 pounds. That's not going to happen. He needs to become a better receiver. He needs to learn how to run the full route tree. he needs to learn that really a lot, and that's going to probably keep him off the field and probably minimize his role on offense, for a while. And maybe he'll only be a special teams only guy for the early part of his career. But for him to stick around the NFL, he really needs to become a full-time receiver.
Yeah, Elo, this feels like the NFL right now feels like Murph was saying, if there's a time for a 5'8", 162-pound, ball handler, it's now for a guy like Adrian Killins. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, this is such a unique draft. So, if you're a free agent under normal circumstances, yeah, that would fit better. You can fit it, but we don't know how that's going to work. Because remember, not like you can just meet up with the team or the players right away. So it's kind of unique, right? I don't know how long. I'm curious to see how the NFL teams will handle the non-drafted players and how they sign them during this process. It's one of the many fascinating plot lines in the coming days and weeks with this draft and beyond. A part of me wonders if his future really is in Canadian football, which is a bigger field, 110 yards. That might suit him better. We've had a lot of success with UCF guys in the Canadian Football League. Joe Burnett comes to mind, for example, had success in the Canadian Football League. I'm drawing a blank right now. Keith Sholigan, obviously in a lineman situation, but Brandon Alexander, defensive back. So, and I think we got to keep that in mind too. We always focus on the NFL, which is obviously the ultimate goal. But I wonder if, some of these guys, their future in pro football might be somewhere like the Canadian Football League. And I wonder if that's really Killins' future, unless, to Murph's point, does a team see in him a guy they can work with, maybe start on the practice squad and develop him into a weapon either on special teams or maybe as a receiver.
I just feel like he's the kind of guy that some general manager is going to get obsessed with, or some head coach and be like, I need to have this guy because I want to have I need my own Tariq Cohen / Percy Harvin / like they can see that guy, right? And he's that kind of guy, and they want to work with that speed, right? It's his speed is just too. I feel like it's too good for everyone to pass up, right?
No, I mean, you take a chance on that because he could be, if he develops, right, he could be a dynamite big play threat. Absolutely, if he develops. So, yeah, you would take a chance on that. I don't think anybody's disputing that. We know he's going to get a shot at the NFL level. He's going to. The question there is it going to be as a 7th-round pick or is it going to be as an undrafted free agent? That's not the issue. The issue is how does he develop from there? How does he expand his game and improve his game from there?
Yeah.
Well, and by the way, I'll give you a comparison to him, and it's because they're in the same system. Kenyon Barner, who's at Oregon, 5'9", 190, fast.
Although Kenyon's pretty much bigger than him. Although Kenyon did put some weight on too, which I think that Adrian is obviously going to have to do.
Right, but now he got drafted by the Carolina Panthers in the 2013 draft in the 6th round, and he kind of hung around. One of the things I think Barner did, he kind of hung around in the league. Can maybe Killins kind of fits that role where he kind of hangs around, maybe he's a 3rd-string back. I mean, Philadelphia is probably an interesting example. They have a ton of young backs that they use. So to your point, I think Murph made a great point. I think in today's football where teams like to use 2 and 3 backs, might give him a better shot. But I do think he's going to have to maybe adapt to certain things. Maybe, is he willing to play special teams and not just return-wise? Could he be a guy that can be developed into a guy that helps on special teams and coverage? Things like that. Who knows, right? A lot depends on who gets drafted. But as we get later in these drafts, if you're a player, you almost have to be very willing to be adaptive to whatever the team wants you to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the things that he is, though, is quite adaptive. And you're right. I think now we're starting to get to the point where we're going to start seeing some guys who are like, maybe they would be better off, waiting to see, what the free agent market looks like, and they can, like you said, Murph, choose where they want to go. One guy who I'm really intrigued by here as we move on to our next guy is Jordan Johnson. We know how great of an interview he is. We love Jordan. We are the we are stands for JJ. There's just no doubt about that. His experience on the field speaks for itself. Started at guard as a freshman in 2016, moved over to center in 2017. Remember we had question marks about that? Boy, that was answered in a hurry. Started all 39 games his last 3 seasons. All American Athletic Conference first teamer twice. In this scheme, this is the part that I think is now he had a virtual pro day where he ran the 40 and 4.25, 21 bench press and all that. But UCF didn't get to where they were the last few years without being a good run blocking team. We know how good of a run blocker he is. I think the question for JJ, believe it or not, is size. It's 6'2", 302. But in addition to that, I feel like are there any scouts or GMs out there who are like, yeah, but he's a shotgun center? You know what I mean? Is that still a thing?
I don't think so, because you look at JJ, he works really well at he does something really. He could work really well in a system that some NFL offenses love to run. That's the zone option, not the zone option, but you're basically your zone running scheme. So those because he can pull. He's extremely athletic and very quick for his size. He gets to the second level really easily, and because he can pull really easily, those zone schemes that NFL teams like to use, those one cut schemes, he can be really proficient in that as a blocker. And so I think for JJ, he has a role in the NFL, but certainly it's going to have to depend on fit, absolutely, because he's very specific in what he would do really well for you. And then he, as you said, Jeff, needs to get stronger. He needs to get maybe not bigger, but he needs to get weightier and just make sure that he can withstand, nose tackles at the NFL level, which is something that obviously he's not seeing at this kind of at UCF. So I think from that standpoint, that's my biggest concern is JJ strong enough? Does he have the ability to last at center and take that physical pounding that he's going to take? Because if he can add muscle, add weight while keeping his nimble feet, and we know he's going to stay in good shape because of his vegan lifestyle. We know he's always going to be, he's never going to be a guy who's going to get out of shape per se, but he needs to add to that muscle and then maintain his ability to move. And if he does that, then I could see him lasting.
What do you think, Elo?
Boy, the question though there, Murph. A lot of that doesn't really translate into a draft pick necessarily, does
right?
It? He might be a free agent that's going to have to work his way in.
Right. So I don't think I'm talking about it. I don't see him being from this point on. I don't think we're talking about guys who would be drafted. So I'm not really approaching that topic. I'm just talking about really his skill set. I do not think he will be drafted.
Yeah, he's going to latch on, and linemen are usually guys that are easier to latch on in finding the right situation there. But I think everything Murph brought up is pretty accurate. Interestingly, if you look at guys that are going to get drafted out of the center position, a guy that, if you followed, obviously you've watched the UCF games, a guy you might know about is Matt Hennessy, who's a kid from Temple. He's going to be drafted here, maybe pretty high, depending on how this goes, but among other. But it's a tough position to crack, and I think everything Murph said is accurate. But I think, again, I think he'll try to latch on to an NFL team, and then, can he build it, work all the questions Murph brought up, can he figure that all out? If not, again, Canadian Football League is a possibility for him. I think he can play. He can play. He's going to play pro football. We just got to see if it's going to be the NFL. Hopefully it works out for him there, and if not, I could see him in the CFL. I would be surprised, unless it was his own choosing, that he's not playing football somewhere in the coming years.
Yeah. No, I obviously, we're all rooting for all these guys, and I'll openly admit that, because, we've come to know them over the last 4 years, and it's been 4 or 5 years, really. It's been an interesting ride. But, JJ, I'd love to see him get a shot because, all these guys deserve a shot. Every one of these guys deserves a shot, and he deserves it just as much as any of them. As does the next guy I want to talk about, which is Nate Evans. Pretty good linebacker pedigree that he's coming from at UCF over the past few years. He was a tackle machine this past year. 117 tackles. We know about his tendency to find the ball. I love the fact that I was able to use the word motor in his scouting report. Finally, I was able to use that with somebody because when you're on the field as much as UCF's defense is, an average of 78 plays per game, the defense was on the field over the last 2 seasons. For him to maintain the energy level that he did, it shows you the kind of athlete that he is, and plus his leadership. I mean, he was a no BS kind of guy, and was well respected by his teammates and coaches. He was named team captain. But I think the other issue is, is he undersized? Even at 240 pounds, he's 6'1", Murph. Yeah. He's just the classic tweener, isn't he? Is he not fast enough or not big enough?
Right. And, well, the answer there, as far as size or speed, might be both. He's got girth, he's got muscle, but at 6'1", again, he's not the size you would like out of a linebacker. And then I don't know if he has enough quickness at that position either to keep up. What Nate has going for him, kind of as you alluded to, Jeffrey, is just his overall want and his desire that sort of just comes off of him so easily. He's a natural leader. He's a guy you want in the foxhole. He's a guy you want in your locker room, getting everybody together. And because he is that kind of person, he's going to be driven to succeed somehow. He's going to do everything possible to make it in the NFL or in pro football, because that's just his makeup is exceptional. But when we talk about tangible stuff and his physical stuff, he does have quite a few shortcomings. And then, yeah, he probably is a tweener. And so I don't really know if he really fits anywhere, but he's going to obviously give it his best shot because he doesn't know any other way but go.
Eric, I look at him and I started having flashbacks. Like, is he a replay of another guy who we really enjoyed in his time here at UCF at the same position, Terrence Plummer?
Ooh, that's a good one. I love Plummer. I
love T Plum too. And he's kind of bounced around. Won a Grey Cup, I think, in the CFL.
Well, Plummer's had a cup of coffee in the NFL, right, with the Redskins and things like that. And that's not a bad comp. I mean, I think Nate Evans, it's everything that Murph described. Doesn't that sound like a Bill Belichick type of player right there? Like Bill just sneaks him up there, but he's like, what the heck? And then next thing you know, because he's a linebacker. Bill's not one that's like, oh, you got to be a 4-2 linebacker guy. Or, look at the linebackers he's had in New England. Like, Teddy Bruschi was not, the biggest guy. Was not the fastest guy, but he was smart. And
well, in fairness, Teddy Bruschi was also a first-round pick, but anyway.
Right. He was super talented. I mean, I'm not saying he wasn't talented, but I'm saying it's not like Teddy Bruschi was just a great player and at college and certainly with a high level at a P5 school. But what I'm saying is Bill has had guys, Jamie Collins, who he took from Southern Miss, and things like that. I mean, I'm just using Belichick in New England. I just wonder if there's a team out there, maybe not draft him necessarily, but I could see he could be a guy that gets snatched pretty quick free agency-wise because, hey, this is a guy that will be willing to do anything, play special teams, play linebacker, do what, I think he's got a spot somewhere in the NFL, and I wonder, does a team, because they didn't have pro day, because they didn't do the combine, what if they actually do this crazy thing that's called watch game tape and are impressed by him? I know it's crazy. It's crazy. Just hear me out. But if you watch him on the tape and making plays, that has to count for something. No? Maybe a team says, you know what, this guy's actually making plays. He doesn't look like the fastest, but somehow he figures out a way to make plays. So, I wonder. Probably not. Maybe the counter argument is no, they're going to be scared off because they haven't had a chance. Oh, well, but I could see a smart organization, a New England type, a San Francisco, somebody who needs a linebacker late, either in the 7th round, 6th, 7th round, and just take him. And you're like, what the heck? Because I think there's going to be a what the heck draft picks as this goes on. And I think maybe he fits in that and surprises us all. Or if not, lands one of those spots as a free agent.
And Eric, just with his makeup and his ability as a natural leader, even if you don't see him as being a guy who you're going to have on your 2 deep at linebacker, maybe he's a guy who's really just a special teamer taking up the last spot on your active roster. He's a guy you want in your locker room. He's a guy that when things get rough can really help pull guys together. And that is a trait and a skill set in itself that he can use to his advantage.
That could be, again, a Bill Belichick type guy. He had Larry Izzo for many years. There was a linebacker who was a special teams guy. Only Bill takes a lot of those things into equation. Not just him, but I just bring him up as an example where I think he could be a fit there. He could be a fit there because I don't think Bill is thinking, hey, what's his 40 time? What's his, I think Bill looks for a lot of intangible stuff. And I think that's why they've been so successful in this dynasty run. They don't grab necessarily the most talented guys. They fit guys that fit their the Patriot way, as that's been called. And I think there's other teams that have similar deals that might fit. I really do. Of all these guys, obviously Gabe's the most talented. I think we all agree on that and things like that. I really am. I really think if you ask me of all these guys that might surprise and get drafted or might be really have a good career even if they don't get drafted, if I had to pick one, I think it's him.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if he's one of those guys who did get selected and like you said, Eric, was kind of like, whoa, we didn't see that one coming. He's already shown up on the radar for at least one team. The Cincinnati Bengals have shown some interest in him. That's according to our SB Nation counterparts at Cincy Jungle. So, to what extent?
Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something?
He goes to Joe Burrow. Yeah, wouldn't that be? The only thing funnier would be
that's a story idea right there. Yeah. That's got the Aubrey Dawkins, Zion Williamson storyline right there.
The only thing funnier than that would have been if Joey Connors went to the Bengals.
Yeah, you could have them watch that clip again and then say, so Nate, what were you yelling at Joe Burrow here on the ground right here? What were you yelling at him right there?
He's probably yelling Miles Jack was not down. That's probably anyway.
Okay.
Bad joke.
What is that?
Couple more guys I want to talk about. Brendan Hayes, pass rusher this past year, all American Athletic Conference second team twice. Never recorded more than 7.5 sacks as a senior and 11 tackles for loss as a junior. Big kid, right? 6'3", 293. Ran the 40 and 4.78 on his online pro day that he had. The size is going for him. There's a great story in USA Today about what guys like him are doing in order to get the attention of pro teams. It says that Jory Epstein from USA Today says he rented a U-Haul, packed up his clothes, his bed, and his mini fridge, and drove 10 hours across 4 states for his pro day. Quote, "In life, really, if you don't take initiative, nothing's going to happen," the UCF football defensive end said. "If I don't, then who will?" Maybe teams might like that, but even as a pass rusher, though, he never took there was no Brendan Hayes game, where he completely took over. He only had one multi-sack game in his entire career, but maybe somebody can do something with him. And when you're talking about D linemen, it all depends on scheme. Do you run a 4-3 as opposed to a 3-4? And does he stay outside? Does he bulk up and move inside? There's a lot of things you can do with a guy like Brendan Hayes, Murph. But are we going to see somebody do it? That's the question.
Yeah, I would like to see him bulk up and move inside, just because I don't think he has that edge quickness that you want from, that sort of the guy who plays the defensive end spot. He has size, he has the reach and the length, but I just doesn't have the foot speed and sort of the hip fluidity to really, dip and drive and get to the quarterback. So I'd like to see him move inside. That's your second
fluid hips reference of the entire podcast, by the way. I like that.
Is it really?
To know that. Yes.
Are we taking shots for your fluid hip reference?
No. We are now.
It's quarantine. We might as well. I should have taken shots before the podcast. But I think, look, that work ethic means something. Also, a kid who's finishing his master's degree this month as well. And I do hope that the level of want, kind of like I talked about with Nate Evans, but in a different way. You see Brandon Hayes, really chasing after his dream job right here by doing whatever possible, driving 10 hours across states in this country to get a look, to get a sniff at the opportunity of a possibility that maybe he might get a job somewhere. And so I hope that works out for him. But there would be a lot of questions to be answered, both from him physically and scheme-wise, as to where and how he sort of translates to that level.
Elo, what do you think? It's so crowded and when up front, and it's just such a hard position to gauge, isn't it?
It is, especially in this condition. Like, I wonder. Let me ask you both this: could he have benefited if there was a UCF Pro Day? Because maybe he stands out more at a pro day than he would on a game tape, for example, right? And then some of those questions that you brought up, Murph, could have been answered at a pro day. And maybe a scout looks like, whoa, where did this guy come from type of thing. Like, what's the story with this guy? Maybe stands out more. Whereas I think in this situation, I think he gets kind of lost in the shuffle. And I do think pro day, it's funny. I'll share this quick story, and then Murph, I'll let you kind of react to that. But I remember the Blake Bortles pro day. I was there for the Blake Bortles pro day, and Gus Bradley was there. Was the Jaguars head coach, and Blake went through his deal. He was really good. Todd McShay, everybody was good. The first guy that reached out to Blake Bortles was Gus Bradley. Gave him a hug and everything. Everybody's like, oh, well, that's adorable. And I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, that's an interesting sign. I think that tells me Jacksonville likes him. I'm like, no, you're reading way too much into that. Because I think at the time some people thought, well, maybe Bill O'Brien and Houston would take him because of the George O'Leary connection. But it turns out, yes, Jacksonville did take him. Afterwards, Bortles kind of won Gus Bradley and the Jaguars over with that pro day in part. And I wonder if a Brandon Hayes could have done something similar if he was given that opportunity.
Well, I think a guy like Blake Bortles, like, he kind of already came in with some buzz around him. Now, enough buzz to get him into like the top 5 at the time, I don't know, but he sort of benefited from the fact that people had already heard of him. And many more people than, I think, Brendan, at least at this point, right, Murph?
Sure. No, I'm not saying they're the same, but I'm saying you can make an impression on Pro Day where a team remembers that. And
Brendan did post his virtual Pro Day, and I actually have the video up on his profile on blackandgoldbanneret.com. I mean, he ran a 4.8840 the first time, 4.78 the second time. His measurables came out. I mean, it's just the question is what makes him stand out to somebody,
Yeah, I think it's interesting you brought up the Blake Bortles and Gus Bradley connection. How about last April, Tristan Hill was really the guy to watch for UCF prospects at UCF Pro Day. And who's running the defensive line drills inside the Nicholson Fieldhouse? Hey, it's Rod Marinelli, the Cowboys D-line and defensive coordinator. And who ends up taking Tristan Hill in the second round?
Rod Marinelli and the Dallas Cowboys,
It was a lot to do with Marinelli and wanting to go with Tristan on that pick. I will say this about pro days and combines that I've said numerous times on the show already, and I'll just restate it here quickly. The on-field stuff is completely overrated, and especially doesn't matter in pro days where it's so sanitized and formatted to something that does not replicate actual football, that I don't care about what their measurements were, how high they jumped, how fast they ran. I do not care, because you get a better sense of that player's physical skill set from watching game tape than you ever will than seeing them run in Under Armour gear. Where the pro days matter, and where this quarantine and where this pandemic and the state the NFL is in, where it hurts these kind of prospects, is just the inability to talk to a lot of guys face to face. And I know we can still do video conferencing, but even talking to Willie Martinez today, the UCF assistant coach, he talked about how it's weird because he likes to get a read on guys in person and sort of read their body language and see how they're responding to questions and answers. And so with that being impossible, that's where these guys get hurt. It's fine they can go into a little field house and run the 40 and do some lifting. That really shouldn't change a player's draft stock. because that is not really football. It doesn't replicate the football experience. But it's those conversations, it's the meetings, it's the questions, it's, can you do this well? It's getting on the board and asking a guy, what is this? What is this? Can you draw this up for me? And just asking and just talking to guys, getting to know them. That's why, the Cowboys picked, Tristan Hill, not because of, he was really good at the bag drill inside Nicholson Field. I was like, no, like Rod Marinelli was there. He talked with Tristan Hill a lot. They established a connection, and that led to him being picked. And because those kinds of meetings are not possible anymore, yes, that is what really hurts the guys. Not the ability to work out for them, but the inability to talk to them, especially face-to-face, and have that real human contact. You know
what it reminds me of? Yeah. Go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it reminds me a lot of like college admissions, right? Where the pro days and the combine, that's like the SAT or the ACT. Like, it can only kind of rule you out in a way. What really gets you into college is your the classes you took and the grades you got in high school, right? And that's the equivalent of your film, obviously, and your
personal statement, really, your story.
And that's the equivalent of the interview, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I view it, and you're absolutely right about that. Like it's like, Brendan Hayes is and other guys are trying to, it's basically they're taking their SAT at the last minute because that's what they have to do. But hopefully teams won't decide on that so much because, it's, you never know what happens on that kind of a day too. There's too many variables. Go ahead, Eric. I'm so sorry.
No. I mean, that's fair too. And it's kind of like college recruiting in a way, right? Like, and I think Murph's example is even better than mine with the Bortles, because you're right, Bortles was going to get drafted high anyway. I think maybe the difference was there that Gus maybe said, hey, this is the guy we should get for a quarterback. But I think the Marinelli example is even better, right? Because think about it. Jerry Jones ain't watching Tristan Hill tapes, right? He ain't watching UCF tape. He ain't doing that. Get out of here. But I guarantee you what happened was Rod Marinelli was sold on him, right? Like, to Murph's point, he talked to him, he saw him up close in person, and you kind of get attached. And I guarantee you, Rod Marinelli went back to the Cowboys and the scout and all the people and said, hey, this guy, I'm telling you, we got to take this guy. And I think that's sometimes how you find diamonds in the rough. It's not because necessarily you watch game tapes. I think the first few rounds, you don't need a pro day. You for the most part, you could figure that out pretty quickly, the top talent. But these diamond on the rough guys that, you're like, why is people like not looking at this guy? And then you kind of see him on pro day, and then you talk to him, and then you kind of like, you know what? I have a good feeling about this guy. I think we should give him a stronger look. And now all of a sudden, everybody else is like, okay, well, let's look into this. Now you're bringing attention. I think it's kind of like college recruiting, right? You know this story well, Jeff, because you worked at UCF. Wasn't Bortles the reason he came to UCF because Charlie Taft just happened to see him, and it's like, hey, this guy is pretty good. He could be a tight end, might be a quarterback. Hey, we should give this guy a look. It wasn't like he was at the forefront of their looking at, but Charlie liked him. And all of a sudden now, the rest of the UCF staff, I'm like, well, if you like, let's look into this more. And they got him, right? Isn't that how that happened?
Exactly. In a way, it's kind of like it's not what you know so much as it's sometimes who you know or who gets to know you. And that kind of segues us to the last guy we're going to look at, who is Jake Brown. For UCF. Murph, you got to know Jake Brown really well and did a story on him, which you can find on the site, which we'll link to in his profile. The expectation, I mean, here's a guy who left football and came back, has expressed interest in rugby, but was a team captain, last year, as voted on by his teammates. Finished his last 2 seasons, first team all conference. Another excellent college football offensive lineman out of UCF. But what is the NFL potential for him? Or is he a guy?
Yeah, it's interesting because reading up on him, it seems like the read is that he would have to move inside to guard. From that standpoint, I just don't know where and how he fits. I just do not know, and I'm not going to try to fake it as if I know exactly how he's going to succeed at that level. All I can tell you is that, yes, he's had a lot of experience at a high level program playing against high level competition. And just from knowing Jake personally, it's a good story of a guy who, he, like I said, after the 2017 season, when UCF went undefeated, he left the team that spring and didn't really want to get into it, but there was a family issue that he had to address back home in California. He grew up in Southern California and came out to UCF because he just wanted to get away from that space and sort of learn a different part of the country, different part of really a different culture. But he had to leave in 2018 and really didn't know if he would be back, and that got taken care of. And then once he came back and was committed to rejoining the team for the 2018 season, leading into that, he got appendicitis, and that was an ordeal in itself. So, this guy's fought through a lot of things in his college career. Still came out, like you said, Jeffrey, to be a team leader, a safe guy, a guy you could depend upon at the tackle spot. I do not know how that translates really, especially if they want to move him inside, kick him inside. I don't know how he'll adjust to that, but he has adjusted to a lot of things off the field already. Where if he had to move inside, that would be nothing compared to what he's already overcome.
Yeah. He strikes me as one of those guys who's like just not starstruck by anybody. He's like, man, I've seen it all, and that can go one way or it can go another. Like it can come off to some scouts as, well, is this guy's head really in it? Or it could come off to some guys as, you know what, this guy's got a good head on his shoulders. We of course know it's the latter, but again, it's a who business. What do you think, Eric?
He's a guy that probably would have benefited if there was a second season of the XFL or a second or third, whatever you want to use from the Alliance standpoint, from the standpoint that he could have played there. I think he would have gotten to play there and could have proven himself, right? And now all of a sudden that's extra tape, because clearly he has a passion, for football. He's overcome a lot of things. So I think that would have given him an extra look, and then teams maybe give him a look in a year or two and say, hey, this is a different guy than he was, than he was when we looked at him in the draft. Maybe that's the CFL right now. Who knows? But that's somebody that probably, if there was an XFL type for a second or season that there's not, that guy, he's one that could have benefited from that. And because even if he doesn't get the opportunity with the NFL, at least he's playing professional football. And right now, there's no other professional football outside of the Canadian Football League. There's no arena football of note. There's no XFL. There's nothing of that. And I think that's a guy like him gets hurt from that standpoint.
As we wrap up the NFL draft stuff, give me the one guy who each of you think is going to be taken much higher than we think. Eric, I'll start with you.
Oh, shoot. I don't know. Maybe Nate. Maybe I'm just going to go on a limb here and just stick with Nate Evans as somebody that gets drafted. Maybe gets drafted when some people didn't think he gets drafted. I don't know what the perception is. Like, do we expect him not to get drafted and we'd be surprised if he got drafted, or I don't know. But that would be probably the one that jumps out to me.
Right. I think that's my issue too, as I sort of ponder this, is like for most of the players that we've talked about, their draft experience and their draft outcome is sort of binary, whereas like it's, Gabe will be a third or fourth or fifth round pick, but for the other guys, it's, are they drafted or are they not drafted? It's not like they're going to be in a range of rounds. It's sort of, right. It's either this or that, and that's it. So I don't know if the premise fits. I'm sorry, Jeffrey, I just want to take your question and stomp all over it.
It's okay. I'm used to it.
Yeah, I know it's nothing you're not already used to from me. I would say I think Adrian Killins probably gets drafted. I would say Adrian Killins gets drafted, which is something I don't think I've seen him mocked at a lot, or certainly forecasted or ranked as being drafted. I just see. I think his tantalizing attributes are too much for a team there in the 7th round to take a chance on. So. That is a big leap from being not drafted to being drafted. That is a big leap, even if it's even if he's taken with the last 15 picks of the draft.
Right. Well, I'm hoping to see Adrian Killins get drafted. I would love to see that just for him, and for his and just to see what he could do on the next level. I think would just be too tantalizing to pass up. So the NFL draft starts, of course, Thursday night, April 23rd. with the first round Thursday at 8 p.m. You can watch it on ESPN, Live TV, ABC, ESPN, and NFL Network. The second and third rounds are Friday at 7, also on ABC, ESPN, and NFL. And finally, the rounds 4 through 7, Saturday, beginning at noon. Saturday at noon.
And by the way, wait, NFL, please, if you want to expand it to further days, we're okay with that this year. Please, you don't have to.
Let's go back to the old draft, and just for the heck of it, let's make it a 12-round draft.
I mean,
like
they might as well.
Right?
They might as well. The AF is dead. The XFL is dead. We've got more players looking for jobs. Let's go 12 rounds.
Oh, stretch it out.
They'll squeeze it. They'll go like rounds 4 through 7 on Saturday, rounds 8 through 12 on Sunday. You have a 3-minute clock. It's really easy, and that leads right into our next episode of The Last Dance.
There you go. Perfect.
Let's stretch it out a week. We got nothing else to do. Let's stretch this sucker out.
One round a night, Eric?
Absolutely. Let's do it, man. What else we got to do? And then, I'm all for it. And, I'm all for it right now. And stretching programming, I think The Last Dance should be going longer than 10 parts. I say we expand it. I want to know about the baby bulls. I want to know about Michael and the Wiz. I mean, just whatever you want to do. I mean, what else we got to do? I mean, granted, I know that everybody's circled under date May 5th, the big opening regular season of the Korean Baseball League. I understand that, but I feel we have room.
I want an entire episode of The Last Dance dedicated to Judd Bushler. That's what I want.
Yeah, it's really difficult to have a sequel to The Last Dance when your thing is called The Last Dance.
Right.
Can we do a prequel? Can we do a prequel? That's what movies do, Murph. We could do a prequel.
Are you talking about the story of the Chicago Bulls with their star guard Jerry Sloan? Is that what you're talking about?
No, we could do like the first dance, the 91 through Bulls through 93. Would Michael ever win a title? There's a prequel. Star Wars has been successful doing prequels. I mean, come on.
You can go through Michael Jordan's baseball career and call it the penultimate dance.
Wait, we already did that one, didn't we? Jordan rides the bus.
Yeah, that was good.
That was a good one.
But I just want to expand it to the point where I just want footage of Michael Jordan sitting at what was formerly the UCF Arena, is now the Edition Arena, whatever it's called now. I want the footage of him in the building upstairs watching Marcus play. That's all I want. Expand it to that point. However, whatever it takes, sneak it in there.
We might get it.
The Last Dance. There were quite a few little UCF cameos in there. Obviously, you had Marcus as a little kid in there, and then you had Johnny Dawkins getting absolutely rejected in college by Michael Jordan.
That was good.
Are you going to bring that up next time you talk to him there, Murph? Are you going to bring that up?
You know what? I might, because this thing is such a phenomenon. Obviously, are you telling me that Johnny Dawkins isn't watching The Last Dance? I mean, he's a basketball nut. He's going to be watching it. So I'm sure he saw himself in this clip.
How do you think he reacted to that? You think he's like, are you kidding me, of all the clips? Really?
Well, it's not just that he blocked Dawkins, is that when he was jumping up to block Dawkins, he hit the back of his head on the backboard, which is just stupid. But obviously, it's Michael Jordan.
I think you're gonna have to ask him. I feel like the next time you talk to him,
I would kill to sit with Johnny Dawkins and watch just one episode of The Last Dance, and have him tell us what that was like.
Especially the first episode, where they cover a lot of Michael's career in college, the ACC career, where they do overlap for a couple of years, he and Johnny. So that would be fun. Yeah, and obviously, yes, absolutely. Even before we talk about this now, next time I talk to Johnny Dawkins, I'm going to ask him about that clip. It's absolutely. How can I not?
Wouldn't it be funny if he's like, I don't remember that.
I don't remember that. I didn't watch it.
We love you, Coach. We love you, man. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And perfect segue, Murph. I appreciate it. We're going to talk about basketball. And one guy coming into UCF and two guys potentially going out. We'll talk about that and more when we get back. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you. Follow us on Twitter at UCF_Banneret. You can follow us individually at Jeff_Sharon, Eric Lopez Elo, and Spokes_Murphy, where if you did, you would have found out that we have a new member of the UCF men's basketball team. Darius Perry joins UCF. He is comes over from Louisville as a graduate transfer. This was first reported by Corey Evans of Rivals, but he's got quite the resume. Murph, a former 4-star, as you wrote in your profile on him on the site. Not overly spectacular numbers in terms of his per game averages, but nearly a 40% 3-point shooter. What do you know about this kid, and how did he come to UCF, or at least come to UCF's attention?
Well, the last thing you asked, I am not sure of yet, as far as like how far the relationship goes back. But I understand why UCF and Darius were in contact, because we talked a lot about last year that how young UCF's basketball team was. Well, now when you have the guys you brought in to sort of fill the gaps in that experience, now when they're leaving, then you still need guys to sort of pick up the slack, because your young guys, all your freshmen, are still pretty young. So really, Darius Perry's brought in to sort of be the next type of Darin Ingram / Matt Milon transfer, the guy who comes in right away and can contribute while also having a huge backlog of just basketball knowledge. I mean, so Darius Perry's played 100 games at Louisville. So he is already, as far as college basketball games, the most experienced player on UCF's basketball team. I think Collin Smith is right behind him at like 97 games played when you include Collin's career between UCF and George Washington. So that experience, I think, is really one of the key reasons why he's here. But on the floor, they need another facilitator. They need another ball distributor, and Darius Perry can do that. He had some big assist numbers in the non-conference slate for Louisville. He's pretty good at finding open guys. And when you look at the roster they have, really their only clear passer, the only guy that really feels comfortable bringing the ball up consistently is probably Tony Johnson. And as a sophomore, I don't think they want to just put him, into the full-time point guard, he must play 30 minutes a night kind of role yet. And so Darius can be on ball as the 1. He can be off ball as the 2. Like you said, Jeffrey, he's a decent shooter, 40% from 3. He's not a volume shooter. He's not going to be like Matt Milon, who takes 173s a year. He's going to be more picking and choosing his spots, but he can knock down his shot pretty well. He's hyper athletic. He's going to have some amazing dunks this year. He's that kind of guy he's just bouncy and explosive. So when you look at all that together, and also just reading up on him, it seems like he's a high energy guy. He's a good guy in the locker room. He's a good guy on the bench. He sort of led Louisville's bench mob a couple years ago when they were making a tournament run when he wasn't playing as much. And he's also a guy who will stand for his teammates on the court. In my article, I put a thing in there, a clip of him almost getting into a fight against a Duke player, which most college basketball fans look at that and go, that's awesome. I like to see guys standing up to Duke players. But Darius just doesn't back down. He's like I said, he's really a high energy guy. And for what this team needs, which is more experience, more ability passing the ball, more shooting ability, more consistent shooting ability, he's a guy who fits all of those boxes. He does, like I said, he didn't have great numbers at Louisville, but he sort of fits what UCF needs from a grad transfer right now.
So he is coming in as the sort of replacement, if you will, for Darin Ingram, not Darin Green per se, which segues us to the other thing we want to talk about, which is obviously we talked about on a previous show, Darin Green declaring his intention to at least explore the NBA draft process. Now it comes out that Collin Smith is actually doing the same. Murph, you had also hinted before that this was kind of something that might have been on the back burner for a while, and now it appears to be happening. Now, we talked about Darin Green, and obviously the discussion around him is, well, we really don't expect him to be drafted. I mean, obviously you never know, at least at this point, it's April, but we don't expect him to be drafted. We do expect that he would likely return. He's just getting some evaluation work done on himself. But with Collin Smith, is the situation any different?
Maybe, possibly. It's hard for me to say. I would certainly say it's different in the fact that he has been in college basketball now for 4 years. Once you add in, not only the years he spent at GW, but then the transfer year coming to UCF, and now 2 seasons here. Maybe he's just looking to start his pro career. But I think for now, I think we have to just assume that they are looking to get evaluated. They are looking to enter the draft, which allows them access, to sort of talk to team personnel, talk to NBA personnel, and they sort of can assess the strengths and weaknesses of their game, where they need to improve. So when time comes, which for Collin, would be next year when he's after his senior year, and for Darin, which would be years down the road, hopefully, then they would know where they need to improve between now and then to sort of help their NBA stock. And so that's why people look at the headline and see that Darin Green is going to the NBA draft. Collin Smith is going to the NBA draft, which, by the way, I should say, it's not official yet that Collin's going to go yet. It's not certain, but certainly it's been reported by Jeff Goodman at Stadium. With Darin, it is certain. He announced it in conjunction with a post on social media with UCF Athletics. But really, the headline is sort of fogs what the real story is about, because they're not leaving. I would be shocked if both of them stayed in the draft and left, especially Darin, who's a freshman, just because it doesn't seem like it's time to go. Obviously, I don't know their family backgrounds, and obviously, if they certainly at this time, I would not begrudge anybody leaving to go get a professional job and get some money somewhere if it's available to you. However, I think this is mostly guys going out and trying to get feedback on their game, and they can do that right now all the way through, I think, June 15th. The deadline for players, early entry players, to sort of say, no, I'm going back to school is 5 p.m. on June 15th, and the draft is on June 25th. Now, that is also up in the air. If the draft gets pushed back because of the pandemic, maybe the players are allowed to stay in longer. Maybe the deadline to make your decision gets pushed back from June 15th to later than that. I don't know. What I'm saying is that these guys for the next couple months will have the ability to talk and maybe and just sort of assess their game with people, with coaches and personnel at the NBA level, and there's no harm in that.
Now, I remember the old rule was you could declare for the draft, and you could even be drafted, but as long as you didn't hire an agent, you were okay. Now, have the rules changed on that?
Right. So a couple years ago, the rules did change on that. And so players can sign with an agent. The agent must be certified by both the NCAA and the National Basketball Players Association. And you can sign with that agent and go through the process with that agent, setting up meetings and whatever with whomever from the NBA level. And then once if that player decides to come back to school before the deadline, that relationship with the agent must be severed. But between now and then, they can have an agent, and then they can help them in this process. That is definitely allowable. I should also point out, and I'm sorry I didn't add this in my article when I wrote about Collin Smith last night, or I should say Tuesday night. This has a precedent at UCF. Remember, Taco Fall declared for the draft after the 2017 season. Was it Isaiah Sykes? Also
Isaiah Sykes, yeah.
That's correct, yeah.
Before his senior season in 2013. So players have done this, and both those guys came back. Obviously, Taco came back for not only his junior year, but then obviously also his senior year after that. And so this has happened. I think the initial shock of like, oh my God, he's going to the draft. It wears off after a while once you really realize what they're probably doing is just getting a better sense of where their game lies for the pro level, which is totally fine.
What about the situation with the G League pathway right now? I know Jalen Green, who's the number one prospect in the ESPN 100 for 2020, he announced that he is signing on with the NBA's G League pathway, which would, according to sources, this is according to ESPN.com, sources who spoke to ESPN.com said it would pay elite prospects $500,000 plus and provide a 1-year development program outside of the G League's traditional team structure. Now, I'm not saying that either Collin or Darin would participate in this, but is this something that maybe in the future we're going to have to keep an eye on with guys on that level who are NBA curious at this point?
Well, okay, so I'll just say the PATH program that the G League has set up is only available to elite high school prospects.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Kids who have not come to college yet. That's why you saw Green go to – that's why that issue with Green is more of a college basketball crisis, whereas, are we going to lose all our good prospects to this PATH program who are never going to come to college and just go to the G League for 1 year before going to the draft? But for UCF, that's not in the cards because let's be honest right now. UCF doesn't recruit what you would consider elite high school prospects to have an opportunity to play in that program.
Yeah, unlike it's not what you're saying is it's not baseball yet.
That is not, and I when I say that, people are gonna like frown and shout and say like, we draft great players, we recruit fine, our recruits are great. Look at Isaiah Adams, he just won Mr. Florida basketball. I understand, but in this term of elite, it's a different class of player.
You're talking about you're talking about the top three.
I'm talking about kids who should be going to Kentucky, and
or if you think about it, who should be just going straight to the NBA anyway, like back in the day with Garnett and Kobe and LeBron, right?
Yeah, this is kind of the NBA's way of trying to kind of what everybody was speculating on, that guys are just going to start going back to the old days or not the old days, but back to, instead of going to college for a year and skipping, now maybe tweak it to where they go straight to this G League, they develop, and that Murph described, and they develop them, and that way it doesn't cost this player on the active roster. Because that was one of the issues before, is you would have a guy like Jermaine O'Neal who would just sit on the bench for 3 or 4 years. Yeah. Now you can have a system where a kid can play. And it's basically a middle finger to the NCAA, basically. And I do think there's going to be changes moving forward on this from the NCAA basketball. I think, Jeff, you brought up the aspect of, there are so many underclassmen that don't get drafted. And a lot of people, and I agree with this, I think if those guys don't get drafted, they should be allowed to come back to college basketball. We've seen that with college baseball, where guys either get drafted lower than they thought or don't get drafted and end up coming back to college baseball. And I think that's I think that's where we're headed with this, because I think there's going to be some people like, come on, we got to tweak that. And I think that's where we're headed with the college basketball standpoint. I'm skeptical on the whole G League concept personally, because I do think players get promoted better in college like Zion Williamson became a bigger name because he was at Duke. If Zion, would he have been a bigger name if he came out of high school? Probably not. It would have, but until he played. But I think. So there's questions whether financially that could work long term, but we're not gonna get into all that on that respect. But I don't think that applies to Murph's point. I don't think that applies to Darin or Collin. And let me defend both of them on this. Isn't this the perfect time to kind of see what information you can get? You're doing nothing right now, right? We're all in lockdown. Why not kind of put your name out there and see what you learn, and find out what the word is, what do you got to work on? What's the harm?
Well, what do you got to lose, right?
Absolutely. They have nothing to lose. They have nothing to lose. Especially if they decide to come back, before the deadline, which again, the deadline is in a couple of months from now. So they have nothing to lose between then and now. And also people should know there are more than I think 100 players who are under the description of early entry players. There are certainly college players like James Wiseman or Anthony Edwards, guys who are early entry, but they're in the draft. They're not going out and to come out later. They're in, but there are more than 100 players currently, including I think David Collins of USF, who are among that list of players who are just testing the waters. That is the key phrase here. They're testing the waters. So this is not rare. It's never rare. And most of the reason why these kids do this is the exact reason why we think Collin and Darin are doing this, is to get a better feel, better sense of their game and what people at the highest level think of their game and how they can improve from here.
So just to clarify, Murph, you fully expect both of those guys at least to return?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead, Murph.
I don't begrudge it. See, and here's the thing, right? So if Darin leaves, yeah, I would be surprised because he has 3 more years of eligibility left. And if Collin leaves, I'd be a little less surprised if he only has 1 more year. But again, I'll break this. I'll really kind of go away from the basketball angle and more to the human angle of this all. Is maybe guys just want to go out and get a paycheck playing basketball somewhere this fall, if possible, somewhere, because their family really needs some money right now. And so the way they can do that is sort of just say, I got to leave college and I got to go play somewhere. It may not be in the NBA, but somewhere, once things open up in the fall, hopefully I can play for money that would be really beneficial for me and my family. You can never begrudge someone that. So maybe they don't come back for that reason. Otherwise, yes, I would expect them to come back, especially Darin and even Collin. But don't Jeffrey, don't make me think that I know everything about the
no, don't put me on the spot.
Well, let me defend Murph. No, in all fairness, let me expand on that, okay? Because you brought it up. These are not the normal circumstances, okay? I think we all can agree. So I think to Murph's point, I think that's a very accurate and a very good point. Is who knows what the financial situation is, number one, okay? Like, if, hey, man, we need money. Here's the other aspect. And Murph brought up the date, June 15th, on that. And let's just keep it on that date. Because I know where you're saying, Murph. I agree with you. I think the NBA draft's going to get pushed back to August. Yeah. Whether they decide to push back the deadline, who knows? That's for everybody to decide. There's pros and cons. Some would say, no, we got to keep it at June.
And by the way, officially, the NBA season is still under postponement. It has not been canceled.
Correct. And I think they're going to try to play, and it'll probably be like in the summer if they do play, and then they're going to push the draft to probably August, is what I've heard. So it wouldn't surprise me. But here's the other aspect of this, and I'm glad you brought this up, Murph, June 15th. But let's bring this scenario out here. Let's say those guys get to June, and by that point, what's the status of the school? Is the school going to be open? Is the school not open? What's the status of fall sports in college? What if there's no fall sports and now there's closure on campus and nobody knows when this college basketball season gets going? When do you meet? Now you're thinking, if you're a player out there, maybe you're thinking, well, I don't know if there's going to be a college basketball. I don't know when I'm going to go back. Maybe my best option is to go to a G League where I can guarantee some money and move forward. I'm not saying that's going to happen with these two in particular, but at the same time, it is interesting, the timing, where are we in June, could influence some of these decisions that some of these kids make.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Absolutely. Also, I should add that the deadline for early entry players to declare for the draft is April 26th. So that's this weekend. So we still have a few more days left for players, I don't know, like Dre Fuller. And we say, hey, I want to try it too. I'm just saying. Maybe he wants to try it. No,
Mr. Anti-speculation is out here.
Absolutely, it's speculation, but that's the point. Maybe he wants to get the same read that Darin.
Throwing names out there willy-nilly.
Absolutely, I am. That's the point.
I'm staying away from that Murph bomb right there. That theory.
It's not a Murph bomb. I'm just saying.
Let's just say the alarm clock is ticking on that Murph bomb, huh?
If Tony Johnson came out Thursday on the 23rd and said, I'm declaring for the NBA draft, we should know what that means. And then it would be fine. Like,
you are giving people heart attacks right now.
Please. Yeah, can I bring up one thing, too? It kind of circling back to our quickly, because I know our podcast is like six hours long. On Darius Perry, it was interesting reading Chris Mack. Chris Mack is the head coach at Louisville. Reading his comments about Darius once Darius decided to transfer back in March, he transferred. I think decided to transfer in March, and so Sports Illustrated talked to Chris Mack in April, and they asked him why he thinks that Darius didn't really seem to fit really well in the Louisville scheme, because if you look at Darius's stats, the last 2 seasons, both his junior and sophomore seasons, he started out playing a lot of minutes, starting point guard, and then as the seasons went on in both years, he really sort of tailed off and played less minutes, wasn't starting. Really, some games where he hardly played at all. And Chris Mack said this, what I think is kind of interesting. And I should preface this by saying Darius Perry committed to Louisville to play for Rick Pitino and in Rick Pitino's system, which is much more up and down and pressing and fast-paced. And obviously then when Perry was coming into the program, that's when everything hit the fan for Pitino and that program. And so they brought in David Pageant, which was then followed by Chris Mack. So obviously Perry was then playing for a system that he wasn't really recruited for. And so Mack had to say this about Perry that I think is interesting. He goes, he signed up for a pressing, running, open style that I wouldn't call us Virginia, meaning Virginia's defense, but we play a bit more in the half court. And what Mack is trying to get at there is that he didn't really think that Perry was comfortable with the style of defense that Louisville plays, which is not, when he says Virginia, he means the pack line defense, which is when everything is sort of packed in and you really don't allow any twos. And it's a style of defense that is really kind of spreading across the nation because it's worked so well for Virginia. But when I read that and I think about Johnny Dawkins, I know Johnny Dawkins doesn't play the pack line, but Johnny Dawkins sure plays a lot of half court. And Johnny Dawkins is not coaching a style of basketball like Rick Pitino, where he's pressing and full courting you and really wants to get up and down. It's more methodical. And I wonder, and I don't know if I'll ever get an honest answer about this, about, are there any concerns about how Darius would then fit in this scheme, which would be his third scheme, really, that he'd be sort of learning from being recruited by Pitino to working under Pageant and Mack and now Johnny Dawkins? It's really three different schemes. And how that transition would go for him. Does he see any obstacles along the way? Because it seems like when Perry played in a more slow it down, half court, possession to possession team, which UCF is more closely aligned, he struggled. And I think that's something that I would like to explore. I don't know if I ever get a good answer on it, but I think it's something to watch.
Unless Johnny is going to play some cards that we don't know he has in his hand.
Watch Johnny Dawkins come out in the pack line defense.
Just go all D'Antoni on everybody.
We'll play by using the term cards there. Very, very good.
Oh, yes, the Louisville. And
See, I did it. I didn't even realize it. All right, well, it'll be fun to take a look at. I hope we get the chance to talk to Johnny Dawkins, hopefully soon, just to catch up on him and everything. And we want to thank you, of course, for listening to us here at the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, as always. Make sure you follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com. We are SB Nation's home for UCF sports content. We got plenty more coming this week, and we'll be following the NFL draft as well. Follow us on Twitter at UCF_Banneret. Of course, all throughout the NFL draft, I'll be online. Murph, you'll be online. Eric, you'll be online, probably lamenting the Dolphins screwing up the Tua pick.
Yes, I'll be doing videos with Mike Tuck.
That's right. You did the first video with Mike. That was really good. So you guys will be working on this together, right?
Yes, we'll be doing that throughout the weekend. I think we're going to do one after the first round and, maybe some during the weekend. And who knows, boys, you might get invited to be a part of that at some point this weekend.
Sign me up, baby.
There you go. There you go, Murph. You got an invite. We'll let you know. I'll book it. We'll plan it out. We'll see how the draft plays out. So, I'll be doing stuff there with Mike Tuck throughout the weekend on the NFL draft as that develops, thankfully. Live programming. God, thank you. And then,
do you have topics that you'll be able to cover once a hacker hacks into Joe Judge's line at pick number 4 for the Giants and doesn't allow the Giants to pick? And you have things to fill the air there, because that's going to happen.
What do you guys want your Giants to do?
I want the offensive tackle.
I'm all flashy. No, give me Simmons. Give me a defensive tackle.
I'm a Simmons guy. That's who I said on the Tuck preview. We have a preview draft. You can follow on YouTube there. We did a draft. I'm a big Isaiah Simmons fan too.
I would be very happy with Simmons. I would be very happy with Simmons. I'm not going to.
And they're not taking the quarterback from Oregon. There's no way. There's no way.
Your boy Justin Herbert, who you wanted for so bad for 3 years, Murph.
I know.
I did, but now I believe in Daniel Jones, so I'll stick with that. I will say, pre-draft coverage is there are not many things worse than pre-draft coverage. There really isn't.
Wow, thanks, Murph. No,
and this is hilarious that we're talking about this on a podcast that
is literally pre-draft coverage.
Thanks for tuning in, even though it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Here's the meta part of this is like no one knows anything, and for those who think they know something, they're all being lied to by agents or coaches who say like, "Oh, we never talked to that player. No, we never met with that player. Oh, they must not talk to that player. Of course they met with that player. They're gonna tell you about it, or we really like that player." Well, we're saying that so that another team will be more willing to trade, more willing than a team that we know loves that player will be more willing to trade, up with our pick to get that guy. I mean, it's all lip service and nonsense. It's really just it's discouraging.
It's people just speaking things out into the universe, It's
literally just yelling into the blank void of space. And unfortunately it gets caught by reporters and reported as fact, and none of it's fact. We have no idea other than Joe Burrow's going 1 and probably Chase Young's going 2. And then from there it's complete chaos. And then I want
to watch The Last Dance, episodes 3 and 4 coming up on
I'm just
Sunday.
glad, Murph, you mentioned this at the end and not at the beginning of this podcast. I'm just glad.
That's true. I stuck it everybody in because I've been holding these deep-seated thoughts throughout entire pre-draft conversations, only to say it's a sham and a mockery. But matter because you've already listened and downloaded, you suckers.
This is great. This is an all-timer. This is so good. All right. On that note, we're going to get out of here.
On that note, again, by the way, Black Gold Banneret, Jeff, where's your profiles? You got all the profiles for the guys?
They're all them up there. I got one more to go as of this show. I'm gonna put one up for Jake Brown the morning of the draft, and go from there. But I got all 7 guys that are up there. Last year, we caught a lot of traffic from the Dallas Cowboy fans when Tristan Hill got picked. So. Here's to our the NFL fans around, sharing our stuff as well. So we're hoping that it works out for everybody. For Eric Lopez and Brian Murphy, I'm Jeff Sharon. Thank you so much for listening. Stay safe. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, and we will catch you later on. Oh, who knows? Maybe we'll do something after the draft, or maybe we'll do another watch. We'll figure it out. Stay on our Twitter feed, UCF_Banneret, for all the latest. We'll catch you later.